Hey everyone, welcome to week 2 of ShakeTube. This is a month-long read-along of Shakespeare plays hosted by myself, Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse, Rainey over at Rainy Day Reads, and Steve Donahue. And we're each doing different plays for the first 3 weeks, and then last week we'll all read Hamlet, and the play that I'm covering this week is Antony and Cleopatra, which is a play that I love. I actually somehow always forget just how much I love this play until I read it again, and that's saying something because I regularly list it as like a top 10 Shakespeare play for me. And I think, on the one hand, why I fall head over heels in love with it every time I read it over again is just because of the beauty of the language. The verse is some of Shakespeare's best, possibly his absolute best, at least in the plays. It's just gorgeous, and I am going to read some of it to you just to let the play sort of speak for itself, because I realized I didn't do any reading of Shakespeare last week when I talked about the Comedy of Errors, and I feel like it's good to actually read Shakespeare aloud. And so I love it for the language. I love it for Cleopatra, because she is a fascinating, complex character. She's histrionic, she's a drama queen, she's hedonistic, and being hedonistic is not necessarily a negative, at least in my book. But she's intelligent, and she and Antony are raised to this sort of mythological level by the language that they're given, and by the terms that they're spoken of by other people. And Marjorie Garber talks a lot about this in Shakespeare After All, which I'm kind of following along with. That they're sort of portrayed in this play as these relics of a time gone by, of a almost sort of mythological past. You know, Antony is this representative of the strong warrior hero, right? As we saw him in Julius Caesar before in Shakespeare's other play with Antony. And Cleopatra is a representative of the pharaohs, who are also kind of a sort of semi-mythological entity, because pharaohs were often revered as gods, sort of, and she of course ends the play in her like royal regalia, and so they're spoken of in sort of mythological terms by other people, especially by Octavius, but also by Enobarbus, and yet they are also like really deeply human and flawed. You know, Antony is kind of an idiot and spiteful and mean, and you know, he's not a great person. Cleopatra, as I've said, is a drama queen, is histrionic, is you know, plays games with people, but is so charismatic. I think she's a lot more charismatic than he is. But I think what it's possible that this is showing. So Marjorie Garber talks about this dichotomy between Octavius and Antony and Cleopatra as a sort of passing away of an old world of mythology and the coming into being of a sort of modern world of realpolitik and Machiavellian politicians and the cynical outview that Octavius has that's extremely utilitarian. And it contrasts that worldview with the old mythological worldview, and yet we're also shown these mythological characters as these deeply flawed people. So I think what's also being suggested is that old world of mythology isn't all it's cracked up to be, right? Yeah, anyway, I just think that this is such a hard play to pin down because it's so ambiguous. You know, the characters are a little bit ambiguous, especially Cleopatra. Well, maybe not ambiguous, but I feel like almost anything you could say about Cleopatra, you could probably contradict with something else. And another thing that's weird about this play is that it's structurally, like, different from any other Shakespeare play. I'm surprised that it's not as long as Hamlet, because there's so many characters, there's so many small scenes that jump around in time and place. It's so, like, cinematic with what happens. You almost get the sense that this would have been a better play for Shakespeare to write in the 21st century so that he can make a film out of it. And that's much different from any of Shakespeare's other plays, and it makes it a bit unwieldy. You know, it makes it a play where it feels like there's a lot of blubber, almost. And the plot is not all that engaging. What happens isn't all that interesting. It's kind of I almost am thinking that it's sort of a precursor to modern literary fiction, where the writing and the characters sort of overtake the plot. Because honestly, honestly, I don't really feel that much of a need to summarize the plot, because the plot is so lackluster that what's even the point, but so little actually happens. Most of this play is people talking to each other, with the occasional off-stage battle. And so it's different structurally from any other Shakespeare play like that. And so maybe that's why it's hard for me to remember how much I love it, because the characters and the writing carry the play so much, rather than the plot. I want to let the play sort of speak for itself to some degree, and so I'm just going to open to some of my favorite passages and read them to you. And the first passage is from Act 1, Scene 5, and it's spoken by Cleopatra. Another weird thing about this play is that there are no real soliloquies. Characters are rarely alone on stage by themselves for a soliloquy, and Antony and Cleopatra themselves aren't even on stage alone with each other, except for one very brief scene. And we don't get much in that scene. Antony is just kind of pissed off at Cleopatra at that point. But Cleopatra is talking to her handmaid, Charmian, and she says, "Oh, Charmian, where thinkst thou he is now?" He being Antony. "Stands he, or sits he, or does he walk, or is he on his horse? Oh, happy horse, to bear the weight of Antony! Do bravely, horse, for wot'st thou whom thou mov'st? The demi-Atlas of this earth, the arm and burgonet of men. He's speaking now, or murmuring, 'Where's my serpent of old Nile?' For so he calls me. Now I feed myself with most delicious poison. Think on me that I am Phoebus's amorous pinches black, and wrinkled deep in time. Broad-fronted Caesar, when thou wast here above the ground, I was a morsel for a monarch. A great Pompey would stand and make his eyes grow in my brow. There would he anchor his aspect and die with looking on his life." So, yeah, you can see in there the sort of referring to Antony in sort of mythological terms. You can also see a lot of sexual innuendos in there, which I won't go into in depth, but they are there. And then we have the wonderful passage where Enobarbus describes the way Cleopatra looked when Antony first saw her. And it's just one of my favorite passages in all of Shakespeare. And so Enobarbus is talking to Agrippa. It's not that important who he's talking to, but he's basically just describing what Cleopatra looked like when Antony first saw her. And so this is what he says. "The barge she sat in like a burnished throne burned on the water. The poop was beaten gold, purple the sails, and so perfumed that the winds were lovesick with them. The oars were silver, which to the tune of flutes kept stroke, and made the water which they beat to follow faster. As amorous of their strokes. For her own person it beggared all description. She did lie in her pavilion, cloth of gold, of tissue, or picturing that Venus where we see the fancy outwork of nature. On each side her stood pretty dimpled boys, like smiling cupids, with diverse-coloured fans, whose wind did seem to glow the delicate cheeks which they did cool, and what they undid did. Her gentlewomen, like the Nereids, so many mermaids, tented her the eyes, and made their bends adornings. At the helm a seeming mermaid steers, the silken tackles swell with the touches of those flower-soft hands that yearly frame the office. From the barge a strange invisible perfume hits the sense of the adjacent wharfs. The city cast her people out upon her, and Antony, enthroned in the marketplace, did sit alone, whistling to the air, which but for vacancy had gone to gaze on Cleopatra too, and made a gap in nature. Upon her landing Antony sent to her, invited her to supper. She replied it should be better he became her guest, which she entreated. Our courteous Antony, whom ne'er the word of no woman heard speak, being barbered 10 times o'er, goes to the feast, and for his ordinary pays his heart for what his eyes eat only. So, anyway, there's actually a great passage in Anthony Burgess's Life of Shakespeare, where he compares that passage with the same passage from Thomas North's translation of Plutarch's Life of Antony, which is where which is the primary source for this play, and it's actually strikingly similar. I won't go into that, but so anyway, I want to skip to the end of the play now, where some of my favorite pieces are, and the scene where Cleopatra commits suicide is like, it has some of my favorite lines in Shakespeare. You know, she says, "Give me my robe, put on my crown, I have immortal longings in me," which I just love. somewhere else around here, she says, well, anyway, somewhere else around here, around that scene, I apparently didn't mark the line, but she also says, I am fire and air, my other elements I give to baser life, which again, I just think is a gorgeous line. So, anyway, that's some of Antony and Cleopatra. I don't feel like this is going to be my most coherent video, because it's a difficult play to have really, coherent, thoughts about. Yeah, so, anyway, I tried to say some things about Antony and Cleopatra. I don't feel like I've been very coherent. There is... So, the one production that I've watched, I've never, like, seen a production, but I watched a film version of Antony and Cleopatra with, Janet Suzman as Cleopatra. And, I watched it a couple years ago when we were doing the old ShakeTube, and, I haven't watched it again, but it was incredible. I don't know Janet Suzman, the actress, and I don't know if she's done anything else. I mean, I'm assuming she has done anything else, but I haven't seen her in anything else. But she is just an incredible Cleopatra. She, I think, captures the character so well, captures the histrionics, the drama queen, but also makes her incredibly fun and charismatic. You know, someone you could when Janet Suzman played Cleopatra, I could see why people actually would be around Cleopatra. Whereas I think when you read the play, sometimes it's hard to see why anyone could stand her. So yeah, if y'all have more coherent thoughts than me on this play, let me know in the comments. And anyway, I'm gonna sign off now because I'm gonna start rambling. But anyway, have a nice day, guys. Bye.